Hey cartographer freaks, it's been a while since I had planned to make this video, but I realized that I kind of bit off more than I could chew with this whole history of maps thing. So I did my best to actually condense it all down to the maps that I feel are the most important ones in history. The really important question is, where did maps come from? Well, the first kind of map that we know of came from the French cave of Lascaux, where we have a lot of cave paintings. And there appears to be a map that shows us the stars Altair, Deneb, and Vega, and even the Pleiades that could be drawn in the cave paintings. This dates to about 14,500 BCE. Now, it does seem like this is genuinely what we are seeing in this image, but it's very possible that it's not. But what is the first map of the world around us? The oldest object that experts agree is a map of something on the Earth is the Babylonian map Imago Mundi from the 6th century BCE. This map, like many contemporaries, did not accurately reflect the lay of the land, but instead acted more like a wheel with Babylon as the axis and the important locations like cities and mountains around the edges, with no indication of distances. It also had no indications of north or south, so you would kind of have to know the locations of certain cities around Babylon to really know your orientation. Maps like these weren't really meant for navigation anyway. Instead, they were for orientation and illustration. Kind of like how books today use simple maps to help readers understand the general location of important features like cities, battlefields, or mountains. The first map to show an accurate representation of the world around it was simply known as the Enact Samandar Map. This map originates in the 7th century BCE and shows the shorelines of the Mediterranean and Black Seas, the Nile and Phasis rivers, and known lands. In a typical fashion of maps of the time, it had a surrounding ocean filling in the unknown areas beyond the cartographer's knowledge. This was still not a very useful map, but at least this time we can get an idea of what the land looks like, if not how to get around in it. Perhaps it could have been used for the navigation of the shoreline of the Mediterranean, or just for people to have a general idea of what the world looked like. However, honestly, the boot of Italy kind of looks like a floppy sock. So when did we start seeing maps that could be used for navigation? In the 3rd century BCE, Eratosthenes actually made a map based on the conquests of Alexander the Great in the East. This used more detailed information and topography that he might not have had otherwise. It had relatively accurate scales and even used meridians and latitudes, where you didn't really see that in any maps of the time period. So this was a pretty revolutionary map. The only problem was these weren't really based on any kind of standard, and in fact, most of the areas that were subdivided by these meridians and latitudes weren't really, uniform. Unusually, this map, while revolutionary, had those features that weren't really seen in maps in the future. However, it did show some topography, so you kind of knew what to expect if you wanted to, invade your neighbor to the north, if you're into that kind of thing. Maps in the coming centuries kind of followed this similar pattern where they would really just show the world that was known by the cartographer and would be projections of mostly cones or flat discs, but really didn't show an accurate representation of the world as we might understand it. One map, a copy of an original from the 4th century CE, that stands out is the Poitinger table. This map, likely kept as a scroll, was 6.75 meters long and was known as an itinerarium. Maps like these were made specifically for navigation and maybe the first of their kind. They gave accurate measures of the road distances between cities and important locations throughout the Roman Empire that covered Europe, Asia, and North Africa. What's really cool is this actually may be a copy of a copy that was made in the 1st century CE, or maybe even the 1st century BCE, during the time of the original Caesar. Jumping ahead about 1500 years, we run into two very important maps, the Padrone Real and the Mercator Projection. In the 16th century, there was a need for more accurate maps for navigating in the trade of the North Atlantic. Diogo Ribeiro, a cartographer from Portugal, made the first scientific map based on scientific observations made during the Magellan expedition, and shows accurate depictions of the South American coast and the Pacific Ocean. And now we run into probably the most important map ever created. The 16th century Flemish cartographer Gerardus Mercator, or Gerardus Mercator, I don't really know how to pronounce his name properly, introduced his world map in 1569, now known as a Mercator Projection. This style of map, also known as a cylindrical projection, preserved the geometry of objects close to the equator with expansion and change of resolution the further north you go. This type of map was far more accurately divided into latitudes and longitudes and rectangular shapes, making it much easier to navigate throughout the oceans and on land. By further subdividing the map into smaller and smaller squares and designating them with numbers, we have our modern latitude and longitude coordinates. The Mercator Map Projection became the standard to this day, and pretty much every map that's used by most people is some kind of modified version of the Mercator. In fact, the United States government still uses the Mercator as Universal Transverse Mercator. This type of Mercator is unique in that each zone is actually the center of the map. So anytime you're actually using a UTM map, that map is far more accurate than using an overall Mercator map, because the center of your UTM zone is the center of that map. Thanks for watching this episode, guys. Next episode, we're actually going to talk about projections. Now, I know I talked briefly about projections, especially with the Mercator projection, but it's important to know that there are other projections in the world and that there is no perfect projection. And in fact, there's no right projection or a wrong projection. Each one has its own purpose, and they're so varied. There are as many projections as probably there are people in the world. Thanks for watching this episode, guys, and don't forget to like and subscribe, and comment below. Which maps do you think I forgot about? Which maps do you think were more important? Which maps in history interest you the most, and what makes them so interesting? I really want to hear. And hey, if I got something wrong, tell me about it in detail. Until next time, guys, enjoy the world of maps. Logan. My cat keeps talking. It's a jerk every time I try to record. Logan, you're a jerk. Logan! Told you my cat's a jerk.